Today we are going to start some actual learning with Python. So first we're going to learn, it's three things today. We're going to learn variable, number, and string. So let's talk about variable. But before that, since Python, you will need a tool called terminal. Terminal for Mac, command prompt for Windows. So I'm using VS Code. You can create a new terminal by choose terminal and a new terminal here, or you can do it on Mac. I'm using VS Code, so it's a terminal inside of VS Code. So you can do a little bit bash processing first, which is terminal language. So first is we're going to make a folder. So you can see I'm already in a folder called Python tutorial. Now I'm going to make another directory called tutorial number 2. Tutorial, just call it video 2. So now you can see here we got another directory. Directory is just a fancy name for folder. Or if we want to change directory to that video, you can type cd for change directory, and you can type video 2. So now I've switched to this video to directory. Now of course this is new, it's completely empty, but just in case, if I want to see is there any file in there already, I can type ls or list. As you can see now it's empty because there's no new item yet. So now I'm gonna create a new file. Gonna call this variable 0.py. Let's just call variable. Alright, so recall in JavaScript, you assign a variable like this. You assign variable like this. Excuse me, that's common. You assign variable like this. You're going to use a keyword with the variable name equal sign, then the value you want to assign to. But Python's a little bit different. Python's a little bit smarter. So you don't have to assign using keyword. You can just assign a variable just by typing its variable name, equal sign, and the value you want to assign to. For example, to assign a variable equal to 1, and there we go. We declare a variable called 1. That's literally it. So now that's how we create a variable. Create a variable, make sure you need to follow some naming convention. So I'm going to type it here. It's basically the same as JavaScript, but just to recall, and in case you don't know, JavaScript. So naming convention. So to name your variable, make sure you know following point. First, it must start. So the variable name must start with a letter or the underscore character. So underscore is control. So it's a symbol that's right after 0 on your keyboard. That's underscore. You should know that. 2 is can't start with a number. 3 can only contain alphanumeric. So it's basically letter and number and underscore. Character. And finally, they are case sensitive. So for example, variable, and all cap variable are 3 different variables. Okay, so that's the general naming convention you need to follow. fourth step. So another thing you can do is, so in here what we did is assign value 1 to a variable named variable. That's literally what this done does. And if we want to do something magic with it, we can print this Python variable to terminal. So for now, I'm just going to refer this terminal or command prompt to terminal. Because I'm using MacBook, it generally is called terminal. So we're going to call this terminal. We can use print this variable to terminal by using print function, which going to take in a parameter, the thing that you want to print. So print value of variable to terminal. Alright, so what do we want to execute this? Well, we can execute this by type python 3 variable.py, and what we expect to see is, as you can see, we saw 1 here. We saw 1 there. Alright. And also what you can do is assign multiple variables at once. So for example, you want to assign x equals 1, y equals 2, z equals 3. If you want to do that, instead of doing that, you can try x comma y comma z equals y 1, 2, 3. And then I can try to print xyz, and you should be able to see 1, 2, 3 for now. That's how you assign multiple variable at once. Alright, so that's all with variable. Now let's talk about number. So there are 3 types of number in Python. We have int, we have float, we have complex. We're not really gonna talk about complex, so I'm just gonna leave that blank. You can check Python's documentation to know more about that. So, int. There are 3 types of number in Python: int, float, and complex. An integer is a number without a decimal point. So for example, if we want to assign integer, so I can say integer was 1. So I can say integer A, integer B, integer C equals 1, 10, some random number. And I just assign integer to it. Next is float. So a float is a number with a decimal point. For example, float A, float B, float C equals to 10.87, 908.45, and 1.8. So I assign float, which contains a decimal point. Or I can also assign complex, which is imaginary number. Not really going to make an example of that. Alright, so that's all with number. Okay. And then, whoops, shouldn't close it. Next we're gonna talk about string. So string is simply just some character. Okay, you can express a string like this. So string A equals hello world, and string B equals hi there. So you can see the difference. The major difference is I can use a double quote and single quote. Single quotes and double quotes are both fine in Python, so it can always interpret this as a string. Now we're going to talk about casting. Oh yeah, also make sure you name your Python file with .py as the extension, so it will know it's a Python file. So what if you want to convert a type to a different type? So for example, I got a float, right? So I can just say a number. So a float num equals 1.98. So I want to convert to an integer. So this is float to int. What you can do is you can say, you can try to print int. So you're going to use int as a function. So you can see the doc string here. For example, convert a number or a string to an integer, or return 0. So if we try to put float num here, and if we print it, so press casting.py, indeed we saw 1, so it's shrunk it to 0. So just ignore the whole decimal point. Or you can also try to int to float. Float num equals 2.9. Okay, sorry. We're gonna set int num 2. If we try to print out float of int num, you can see it's at 2.0 here. Alright, so now what we will do is, what type is it? So number equals 2.0. Alright. Okay, spoiler alert. So what do you think the type of this number will be? And if you pay attention to it, which I did, I just unfortunately spoiled it for you. But if you didn't realize it, guess what type is it? Is it supposed to be an int or float? Well, there's a way we can know it. Recall that in JavaScript we have a type of function. We have a type function in Python. So if we want to say type, we can substitute number to here. We want to print that out. And you can see class float. So this is a way to determine what type is it. Okay. Oh yeah, lastly, we're going to talk about change a string. Stir, that's what string in Python is. So you're gonna change string into stir. So if we say number, so if int num equals 3, and I want to change it to stir, I can just simply type stir num equals stir int num here. So it's just stringify this int num to string num. I'm going to say print stir num. I can see it print out 3. And if we want to say type, well, what type is it? You can see it's class stir. Similarly, we can also try stir to int. Which, if you have a string num, stir num, let's call this 2. And I want to change this to an int. We can type int here and then stir num. So first, what it does is it changes stir num to an int, then it gets a type of that int, and then it's print that out. So the last command is class int. However, stir to an int, not successful. So what if a stir num, maybe not a stir, maybe not a number after, oh, excuse me, this should be a stir. Let's try that again, see if that's still int. Yes, it is still int. But when it's sternum, maybe not a number after all. So if I say hello world here, and I will try to print out type int sternum. What do you think will happen? Well, let's try to print and see what happen. And you can see it said a value error. So that's probably the first error you're going to be fine. Say it's value error invalid literal for int with base 10 hello world. And yes. So make sure it will raise raise value error if string is not a non. And yes, so make sure you check that before you change start to an int. And yes, that will be all we covered today. We covered quite a lot of stuff. I would say we covered variable and we covered 2 data type. So in next episode video, I'm going to talk about some other data types, a little bit fancier than these. But for now, thanks for watching, and I wish to see you next time.